When looking into history of how schools became desegregated across the country and here in South Carolina, likely you always think first of Brown versus Board of Education.
But one case came before that, and it was right here in South Carolina. It's Briggs versus Elliot. And today, Tom Mulliken, the lawyer representing the Briggs family, announced they have filed a petition to the U.S. Supreme Court to rename the Brown versus Board of Education case to Briggs versus Elliot.
Yeah, News 19's Cassidy Bayer has more on why.
We've come a mighty long way.
To remember these families and James McKnight with a moment of silence.
We've come a mighty long way.
Praying that the U.S. Supreme Court will correct the clerical error in naming Brown versus Board as the first party, the named party in that case, and put Briggs versus Elliot, which was the first case filed before the Supreme Court.
Lawmakers, activists, and educators gathered in Clarendon to hear from those who filed a motion to the Supreme Court, asking them to correct an omission in regards to the milestone decision of Brown versus Board of Education. Attorney Tom Mulliken, along with others representing the Briggs family, are filing a petition asking the court to rename the case Briggs versus Elliot.
And there was a price for being first. It's in no way to denigrate the actions of the Brown family in Kansas or the other states. But this is where it started, and this is where the fight was taken, and it was an important fight.
Brown versus Board of Education was decided in May of 1954. Briggs versus Elliot was decided in 1952. The Briggs family, represented by Nathaniel Briggs, has wished for equal name access to the case that played a role in the milestone decision to desegregating schools for going on 70 years.
Everybody I have ran into across this country know only about Brown. And I, doing a program on Briggs v. Elliot, trying to explain to them there's another case. There's the first case.
Briggs, however, wants the history to be rewritten not only for his family, but for others who stood with them in a time of uncertainty.
Briggs and others versus Elliot. Sometimes we get it lost that we don't mention those other folks who suffered along with my parents.
In some instances, we hear to be first is not always the best. In this case, however, and according to Cecil Williams, a photographer of Clarendon County petitioners during these desegregation efforts, says being first in this instance of attacking the forefront of segregation did matter.
This is just the first step. It will be a long uphill battle until this case receives its rightful place in history. And we're up to the task as long as we have the mind, the body, and the spirit to be able to go forward with that.
Cassidy Bayer, News 19, WLTX.
Well, the petition did make it to the U.S. Supreme Court today, and Nathaniel Briggs, along with others, look forward, they say, to discussing this and hoping to correct the court's decision and redoing the name. Well, did you know that the first case in Brown versus Board of Education started here in South Carolina? Now you do, of course. South Carolinians know that Briggs versus Elliot was actually the first of 5 lawsuits that would be incorporated into what would become Brown versus Board of Education. The case is named after Harry Briggs, one of the parents of 20 parents who sued to equalize all aspects of education for African American children. The suit stemmed from a petition for Clarendon County to provide buses for Black students.
The State Department of History says more than 500 Rosenwall schools were built in the Palmetto State between 1917 and 1932. Funded by then Sears President Julius Rosenwall, the schools provided education for African American children in the rural South. The department says they played a critical role in educating Black children across the state. Across the state, I should say. The Department of Conservation says only 40 schools are still standing in our state. Many schools became abandoned following the school segregation program under Governor James Burns in 1951. Governor Burns developed the school equalization program because of Briggs v. Elliot. According to the Lowcountry Digital Library at the College of Charleston, the program built new schools for both black and white students to allegedly provide equal access to education and amenities like running water and buses. The program also upheld separate but equal doctrine to prevent integration in South Carolina schools. Often the new black schools were still undersupplied.